Yeah.
And that's stuff.
But
You-
you-
it's all technology.
I figure always those successful.
Oh, dear.
She's such a good. And also have lots of friends share and jump around. I didn't have. Race, Jane, you know, Jane. She, I just.
Good.
Yeah.
Always.
I'm sure there's. Can you see how many are following?
I haven't checked since Monday, so it's several days out of date, but on Monday, there were 907 people who downloaded it. So it's definitely there are some people who are interested, which is so exciting.
Really? He does, yeah. They're actually better varieties of kids. Because it takes my.
All right, everybody. Good evening. La 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 ya la 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 ya 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 la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 la. I have to fight the urge to say Shabbat Shalom. Right? Welcome everyone here and at home. It's nice to see so many of you join us virtually, as well as those who made it out into the building tonight. Everyone's looking over to see who's online. I am very, very. Oh, they can't see if you wave over that way.
Well,
There. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe they can see that. I'm very excited about our conversation tonight. And I plan to use this time in several different ways that I will explain in a moment. But I'd like to start out this session with a bracha over Torah. And some of you may think to yourselves, my God, he does that blessing all the time. Life should be such that we experience everything as an opportunity to come away changed, to have done a little bit more thinking, and to see ourselves as slightly more evolved than when we started. So if you know the bracha, join me. If not, amen works. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Folks at home, you hearing us okay? Susans, you can give us oh, good. I'm glad to hear. Okay, so here's my plan for tonight. What did I just see? Is it?
No, the camera flipped to the brick wall.
Oh, that's funny. You're all looking at a brick wall. So my plan is to start out by sharing with you what I think we've done so far. Then I'm going to spend a little time sharing with you what I think is in front of us to do. I'm going to share with you some of what I think has already been undertaken or started. And then we're going to finish the evening breaking into 4 groups. And it actually works quite nicely. We're going to split the people online into 2 groups. And Cantor Mike is going to go with one of them, and Larry's going to go with the other. We're going to split this room in half, and Shelly's going to go with one, and Maura Erica with the other. And the plan is, much like I did the last 4 sessions, which was agonizing, to sort of sit there and take it in. Do you know how hard that is for a rabbi? So primarily, they're going to be there just to listen and to take notes. I'd love for the conversation to be driven by you, but that's down the road a little ways. Sound like a good agenda for tonight? You can always add or take me a little off track, but know that I am way better than Betsy at keeping us focused. By the way, I got an email from her this morning saying, so how'd the session go? And I said, I'll let you know in 12 hours. I think jet lag is working its magic on her. So over the last 4 sessions, and you should listen to what I have to say and see if you agree and if you have anything to add. What I think has happened is that using Rabbi Spratt's book and Betsy's facilitation, and most of all, your interactions, I think that we've helped you open your eyes a little more widely. And by that, I mean seeing the big picture. I think as we look around the world, and we're all thinking really in really new ways about the rapid changes taking place globally, domestically, locally, interpersonally, and internally, I think we've gotten used to thinking big. And I think that we've done a good job the last 4 sessions of getting you to apply some of that same kind of big picture thinking to Temple Sinai and progressive Judaism. I think we've gotten you to think more loosely as well, opening your mind to contemplating patterns from points of view that might not have been as natural for you as when you walked in the door. Starting to think about the ways in which your children or grandchildren are going to interact with our traditions. We have definitely done a good job of getting you to verbalize, vocalize the things that are really important to you. I've heard a couple of really important statements. Primarily, they came from Betsy, but they guided how we think about the whole thing. I'd like to share with you what I heard. I heard her say, and I hope you heard her say, that change is not a means to an end. Change is not something we just have to get through so that we can realize the goal. But change is a way of being. It is the secret to Jewish survival. We have always been in constant evolution as a people. That's true. What is also true is the rate of change is much faster in today's world than it ever has been. So things evolved in Anatevka, but a lot more slowly, although I don't know if Tevye would agree, a lot more slowly than they're changing today, okay? Here's something that I heard that, again, I hope you heard, so I'll say it again. As we were contemplating the ways that millennials and those that come after them are going to be interacting with tradition and affiliation and the economics of Judaism and the exceptionalism or the ethnocentrism of Judaism. For those of you who came out of your generation, and me who came out of my generation, and Maura Erica, who's the representative millennial in the room, out of her generation, each time it changes. And I'm quite sure that your grandparents probably complained about the way that you were doing Judaism. Okay, maybe not everybody, but most of you. You gave the generations before agita. Betsy said it is really important that we not judge the generations that are coming on how they interact with Judaism. We might think to ourselves, they're not serious enough about it. They're not donating enough to it. They're not participating. They're not coming. They're not whatever you want to say they're not doing. Okay, they're not. That's who they are. They're not who we were. And so we have to maintain that open-mindedness and respect, even if it's not what we would wish were happening. I hope that over the last bunch of weeks, part of what we did was create a sense of partnership and co-creation for you. I'll come back to this in a little, actually, no, I'll say it right now. As I was listening, and I sat back in the corner where Maura Erica is, and I was listening to your comments, and I was writing down Betsy's points, but mostly I was paying attention to what was not being said in the room, and the suggestions that were maybe underneath your comments, or the way in which they were delivered, or the questions posed. And what I definitely picked up on was the sense of concern. I will return to that in a few minutes, but what I hope you will take away, maybe more than anything, because I think this is core to who we are and where we're headed, is the importance and centrality of co-creation. If there were one thing that I could do, it would be to disavow you of any sense that I've got some kind of plan in my mind, an agenda that I am simply pushing you towards and just need to execute with either your assent or your I don't know, being oblivious to it. That is not the case. This is not my synagogue. This is our synagogue. And so it would be counterproductive for me to dictate where that goes. Betsy and I were having a long conversation about tonight. And one of the things that we were so clear on was that, and for those of you that read through the end of Awakenings, especially in the summation at the end, Rabbi Spratt is really clear about the importance of ownership, of diversification, democratization, however you want to say it. And so at times when people feel maybe unsettled, they often look to leadership to say, what do we do? Where are you taking us, Rabbi? What should we do next? And if I play into that, I specifically undermine the process of engaging you in owning your synagogue's existence. And so there will be times when I will resist the urge to tell you what I think, because I'm just one more opinion. And that should be a driving principle as we roll enthusiastically into our future. I'm not going to take a lot of time for this, but is there any other observation that you would make about the things you heard us accomplish over the last 4 sessions? And I'll, if you're not hearing them clearly at home, I'll repeat what I hear from the room, but hopefully the microphones will grab what's being said. And at home too, if you have thoughts about what you think we've accomplished in the first 4 sessions, by all means, raise your hand and we'll bring you in.
I think you summarized what we accomplished. I would share that maybe, but one concern I heard that maybe wasn't summarized is we didn't hear the missing link, in my opinion, and I think several people raised this, is not hearing the voices of millennials or Gen Z or whatever these people, that generation, and how can we even co-create a future if the people that are really going to carry the synagogue forward are not part of that conversation yet.
Thanks, Terry. Did you at home hear what Terry was saying? Oh my God, really? That's fabulous. Marty, we did it.
4 times.
Okay, this session's a charm.
And session.
And allow me to simply make it very clear how grateful for Marty I remain always. Thank you, Marty. Can you tell that I'm trying to avoid answering Terry's question? No, I'm kidding. It was an excellent point, and we'll address two pieces of it, both what I've done and what it means going forward. So sit tight for a little longer. I am also aware of that observation. Okay.
But maybe they'll be different.
Well, so Maura Erica said she has so many responses to Terry's observation. Do me a favor, hold it for a little bit longer, and then when we get there, jump in if you haven't heard what you think you needed to hear. Thanks, Maura Erica. Anyone at home want to add anything else in? Okay. Oh, yes. Thanks, Tamara.
I was struck having tried to work in the workforce through a lot of change projects where typically there's a lot of resistance. I was struck by how open the conversation was and how much excitement I personally felt, and I think I felt from the room, to the ideas of change. I mean, I know it's a self-select audience who's even, choosing to come to this conversation, but it's exciting to me to think that since Scott and I are relatively new here, that we've joined a place where people may hopefully carry that spirit forward. And though lots of things won't work out, most experiments, don't work, but that's a way to get to the next spot of something that if that's the energy, I think there's so many things that are possible.
Did everyone home here, Tamara? Good. Yes. That's why I signed a lifetime contract, because you don't find that anywhere. Ronnie came up just before the session and said, my God, did Rabbi Spratt use Temple Sinai as a example of what can be done? Because we're doing so many elements of what he's prescribing. Yeah. And I know there was some other far less significant author to the book, but as far as I'm concerned, it was Rabbi Spratt. I don't even remember that guy's name. No. Okay, so let me move us forward. So this section I just labeled on my notes what we're going to do now. Okay, so the first thing that I want to emphasize, and I think Tamara put her finger on it, is Temple Sinai is not in trouble. What a fabulous position from which to contemplate this future. I mean, I don't know how many of you have friends that you speak to from other congregations in either other parts of the country or other types of populations, but there are a lot of synagogues out there who are in survival mode, who are struggling to figure out how are we going to make this happen? Which program has to be cut? And not because it was an experiment that didn't work, but because we can't afford it. Which staff person needs to be let go because we don't have the resources? That's not Temple Sinai. We're adding programs. We're adding staff. Our membership is growing. This is a fabulous position to occupy. Another reason I took a lifetime contract. And so part of what I heard at least one person articulate, thankfully, was the question, if what we're doing is working so well, then why are we sitting here talking about change? And I'll go back to what Betsy said. Change is what keeps it interesting and vibrant. And while you may or may not relate to this in quite the way that I'm going to present it, I bet it'll sound familiar. As individuals' attention span has shortened in this modern moment, thanks to all the influences you're well aware of, I think we remain less satisfied than maybe we were 50 years ago in the same thing. Freshness is now a value. And if it's not there, it can grow stale. Now that's a double edge. You know this because somebody who comes in to say Kaddish to a service and walks in and everything is different doesn't look around the room and realize, man, everyone here is loving this. What a great energy to this service. What they notice is, I don't know any of the songs. right? So change for change's sake is something that Cantor Micah and I are very, very conscious of, and there's a balance. And so it's important to hear that we're not in trouble. What I want to ask you now is a little bit harder question. And again, we're only going to take a few minutes on this because there's a lot more to get to tonight. But I wonder if you're able to articulate this. Over the last 4 sessions, the comments from Betsy, the conversation as a big group, and perhaps most importantly, the dyads or triads that you formed. Is anybody able to articulate any change in your perspective on Sinai or Judaism or your place in it? Can you articulate change because of these sessions?
I'd say that everyone has a bit of a different definition of what the synagogue actually means to them and what Judaism means to them.
And for you, was that a surprise?
Yeah.
That opened your mind. Your perspective was changed as you started to hear from so many people their different priorities and perspectives. Great. Thanks, Amy. Did you hear that at home, everybody? Good.
I had a similar thought to what Amy was saying, where it's a different thinking about being Jewish and also doing Jewish.
Yes. So Sharon's perspective was expanded as she realized just how important it is to be Jewish, but also to translate that into doing Jewish. And that was a theme we heard many times. Good. Very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Stu. Sorry, Gary. I just looked there. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I was gonna say, I'm like coming out of these sessions really a lot more encouraged. That this group really has great ideas. I mean, I'm just more encouraged that we're not in some stale place where we just go Friday night, turn the pages or whatever.
That's
We're
great.
thinking outside the box, and it's really.
I think maybe we all need a little of that as so many other elements of the world seem to be going to shit. It's nice to know that Sinai's solid. Dennis, go ahead. And I'll share what Karen put in the chat box in a moment. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, it brought to mind is that, change
Hold
is
on one
going.
second, Dennis. We're going to change one sound setting.
What?
God, that Marty. Oh, God.
You give them thanks and see what happens.
Right. Right. Yeah, listen, you get what
You get what you pay for, is that it?
There you go. Dennis, I think we can hear you now.
I think you heard the last statement I made, wipe that out. No,
Yeah, okay,
good. I think what it brought to mind to me is that, change is going to happen. The question is it by evolution, revolution? How much do you control it? How much of a say do you have in it? To me, it also represented when listening to the groups going, I didn't see a consensus of what change people envisioned for Temple Sinai or for the future. And I think one of the things that came out of the Awakenings book, to at least for me, was that a lot of the change that was happening in the Jewish community was because of individuals, a spark that hit a person, and that person had a recognition of a need for the community that others didn't really realize they even had. And so that change happened. So sort of a little bit of a revolution within that element, as opposed to the change which would normally occur, period, for any institution, in Temple Sinai being obviously one of those. Obviously, we've had a lot of change over the years that I belong to the synagogue, and I'm not sure so much of it was directed as it just happened. So it's nice to see that actually there's an intent here to make change a conscious decision rather than an unconscious one.
That's great, Dennis. Really well said. Thank you. The intentionality behind change and the importance of one individual is something I'm so proud of. I'll come back to this in a little bit, but it is one of the key successful methodologies behind Sinai Circles, that one person can say, I have this interest. I bet I'm not alone. And before you know it, you've got a circle full of people who are so grateful that you thought to run a circle like that. Let's see, Marty, what do we got in the chat box there? Karen Conti says, I'm more aware of the importance of change in the Jewish journey and how excited I am to be a part of Jewish evolution. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you. And I appreciated Dennis's juxtaposition of evolution with revolution. I don't know. I mean, my first gut response would be to say that evolution is something that happens less intentionally, reactionarily to circumstances, the secrets to survive. Whereas maybe revolution is when you realize I'm going to make a change. And I love the idea that we embrace both of those. Okay. One more from Scott. Sorry.
Sure. I've come to realize that divinity is still the goal, the elation, miraculousness, the responsibility. But you can, weigh anchor, you can take up the anchor and explore a little bit more to get there. It doesn't have to be the traditional religious closure to be the method of getting to divinity.
Did everyone at home hear Scott? Yeah. Okay. So Scott said that he's expanded his understanding that the goal here is divinity, and that there are more paths to get there than just the traditional prescribed image you might have of where holiness happens in a synagogue. I want to come hug you for saying that. Thank you, Scott. Afterwards. Okay. Anyone else want to offer anything else before I move us? Okay, great. So, Cantor Micah gave me this language. Though I will mention that I was just reading the summation one more time, and I thought I saw hints of this in the book. We were talking about this on Monday, or maybe it was last week. And yeah, what are you going to do, right? And she said that Judaism is so fabulous as a toolkit to help individuals flourish in their lives. A few years ago, she gave a great sermon on languishing versus flourishing. That was from the New York Times series. We understand the difference. And so I think you're sitting here because you've tasted what flourishing looks like, as assigned or as credited to your Jewishness. If you'd never tasted that, you probably wouldn't be with us this evening in this conversation. So part of what our goal or task should be is to figure out how to leverage that, how to share that with more people. Not to sound too much like a proselytizer or a missionizer, we've got some pretty good news, and it's nice to be able to share that with people, that what they probably surmise they actually need can be found within Judaism. So what I want to do now is run through a couple. This was a fairly quickly populated list of examples of things that have been taking shape over the last number of years at Sinai, and you have observed them in whatever way you did. Maybe you thought, oh, that's an interesting new program, or, oh, that was fun, or I like that. But there's a pattern here, some of which I was clearly aware of, some of which I didn't even see until Rabbi Spratt and that other guy put it out in a book and thought, oh, look at that. Look at that. So I'm just going to run through these. These are in no particular order. Actually, yeah, you know what? I will do this. So first of all, Sinai circles. I think that this has become such a badge of honor for the synagogue. Other synagogues have degrees of success. Most of them don't, with small groups. Everybody understands that taking a big group of people and breaking it down into a small group of people is really helpful in allowing or facilitating deep, meaningful relationships to take place. So the methodology of circles is really effective. The empowerment and democratization of ownership is fabulous. Larry and I have guidelines, but those of you who've served as circle leaders understand that there are plenty of examples where the guidelines don't work. And so for you to make the experience most effective, you need to stretch or grow or modify. And the synagogue is there to help support you in that, not close you down. If your leadership had a different kind of ego, maybe we would feel threatened by putting so much ownership of the program back in your hands. Isn't that why you hired us and paid us the big bucks? Thankfully, that's not the mentality around our office. There are a fair number of examples of adult ed classes, and my brain runs through Musar and our Elul classes. We've got adult ed taught by local. Wind, you've taught classes here. Looking to see who else is taught. It is natural at Sinai that the sources of information or education don't need to come from the cantor or the rabbi. Empowering people to do that has been a long tradition here, and it's important. There's been an expansion over the years of lay ownership around spirituality and worship. It's ramping up partially as a result of some of what I've heard in this series, but there are plenty of examples over the year where the cantor and I either decide to take a night off, Shabbat Shuvah between the two big holidays, or Thanksgiving weekend or something, and we feel so comfortable just handing the bima over to lay leaders. We have the Torah nerds who love to lane Torah. The cantor's ego is not threatened by that. We have David Fisher and I were just talking about delivering a Devar Torah in the coming period, and anybody who wants to deliver a Devar Torah knows that they're welcome. So handing the explicit worship moments back over into the hands of congregants is core to where I think we need to go. There are constant new spirituality opportunities that are always being experimented with at Sinai. We've got Avodat Halev, Zentangle, meditation retreats. We've got opportunities beyond just our meditation circles. We've got lots of great things going on. Even walks with the cantor. There are so many examples of ways that we step outside the sanctuary and yet bring with us the spirituality that is so important to the human animal. And then there are new experiments too, some of which work. The podcast, I'm still trying to figure out and get my brain around the podcast. Amy, thanks for helping me think through how to make this thing as effective as possible. And then there are lots of experiments that don't work. Maura, Erica, and I have been modifying our Temple Sinai Inspire program for kids post B'nai Mitzvah. We had a pretty good idea of what was going to work, and the families trusted us and said, "Yeah, let's give it a try." And we were 2/3 of the way through the first year of it and realized, no, it needs some pretty significant modifications. It didn't work the way we thought, and so the expression of experimentation is really central to how we professionals feel empowered at Sinai. That's a really special dynamic, to know that the leadership trusts us to experiment, to try new things. And if they don't work, okay, we gave it a try. And now what I want to just share are some of the things that I've also been doing over the last months as a very clear piece of this process of exploration. And this is to start answering some of your questions, Terry. Obviously, the group who's sitting here, the self-selected demographic sitting here, leaves out important voices in the synagogue, not just millennials, but also, a lot of our elders are not with us tonight. And so hearing from the people who have been at Sinai for 50 years, Carol, glad you're here, is really exciting. By the way, we had a fabulous moment at our relaunch of Staying Connected, where we went around this room full of people who were seniors and had been connected to Sinai for different lengths of time. And we went around the table, and someone had been here for 8 years, someone for 14 years, someone for 25 years. Carol says, "I've been here for more than 50 years. And then Art Wernicke and Barbara Kassman speak up and say, "We've been here for going on 24 hours. It was It was just great. I mean, what a terrific example of, the continuity. So I have set out to be on kind of a listening tour of sorts, and it's taken the shape, many shapes. The first is I've had a chance to speak with some of your adult children, and one-on-one, I sit down and I ask them questions. Questions about what they've loved, and and why they would still consider themselves to be a Jew as an important part of their identity, the things that were most meaningful to them along the way, what they would want to continue and perpetuate for their children when it's time, and what they have no intention of perpetuating for their children, what they think is the problem with congregational Judaism, those kinds of questions. I ask the questions and then I shut up and I listen. And beyond just getting great information, I've made some new great friends, and it's so interesting to listen to them. And I think they actually, several of them have either told me or their parents, I can't believe he wanted to know what I had to say. What an exciting thing to feel like your voice matters. Kind of breaks my heart that it wasn't obvious, but sometimes we need to be shown that. The other thing which we've done, another thing that we've done is so far a series of 2 parlor meetings with the group of parents that have our young children, the ones who come on Sunday mornings for our pre-K and kindergarten program. Is it the kindergarten parents also? Yeah. So these parents are more Erica's cohort. They have kids. They have found their way back to the synagogue. Few of them have joined because you don't have to. Thanks to the Larry Cohen Fund, we get to underwrite the cost of their participation. Just a loss leader, if you will. Let them see who we are, see what we're doing, see if it grooves with them. Now, this is also a self-selecting group. For whatever reason, they either married a partner who insisted on it, or they had a good enough experience when they were kids that they bring their kids back. We can't rely on the whole generation doing that, although we've never been able to rely on that. But this group is in the room with me, this room actually, and we had a fabulous conversation. It was so exciting as I was getting them to articulate the things that they're so pleasantly surprised about at Sinai, the things that they still need and can't find at Sinai, with the reasons that they've found their way back to congregational expressions of Judaism. It was so enthusiastic that when we finished, number one, again, heartbreakingly, they thanked me because I'm there paying attention to what they have to say and seemingly caring. And number two, saying, can we please do this again? So we did. It was a couple months later. I don't know how much time elapsed between the two. And I assured them that this is an ongoing conversation. I pointed out to them that they are our future. So we would be silly not to spend as much time with them, responding to them as possible. I had an interesting opportunity several months back now. Federation was running an event at a coffee shop in Darien, and it was meant for parents of young kids who are themselves an intermarriage, or where only one of them is Jewish. And they wanted a rabbi to come talk to this group. And I was lucky. I got invited and I loved it. There were about 9 couples. And again, this is a coffee shop that was empty. They rented it out for us. A coffee shop of about 9 couples, none of whom, actually, that's not true. One of them was sort of 2 Jewish adults, but one was not raised Jewishly. But anyway, all of them trying to figure out, what the hell do we do? And they had a rabbi there to talk to and ask questions. Again, it kind of broke my heart, because if any of them had worked with me as premarital couples, we would have had these conversations much, much earlier, before they had a kid in front of them trying to figure out, well, what do we do now? Do we get them baptized, or do we go to religious school, Sunday school at Temple Sinai, or some version of those? It was gratifying to see that number of couples in Darien would come out on a whatever night of the week it was, and to try to give attention to an establishment authority figure and to listen to what he had to say or suggest. And I listened really carefully to them as well. It was really exciting to know that they're not necessarily going to find their way to us. Maybe we need to find our way to them. The podcast, by the way, was a piece of that. There were 2 reasons that I launch the podcast. The first was that it's so far outside my comfort zone that it makes me throw up a little bit in my mouth when I think about it. And so I knew that I needed to do that for a little bit of growth. But second of all, like I pitched circles, there are things we do at Sinai that are going to always grab a fabulous group of people. And then there are other people who will never avail themselves of the things we have. You know, they're never going to hear anything I have to say from the Bima, maybe on Rosh Hashanah, but what can you do with a couple of sermons there? They're not going to come to adult ed. Maybe their kids come, maybe their kids don't, but they're not getting what Sinai and Judaism has to offer. So I thought maybe I can get a few more ears with a podcast. And sure enough, I was just telling Diane that as of just a few days ago, the podcast has been downloaded more than 900 times. So, you know, it is exciting to think that, you know, people are listening for other forms of Judaism. Let me pause and see what thoughts, reactions, reflections, requests, questions, challenges, critiques you have. Yes, Arlene.
In your discussions with the parents of young families, I just want to say, Carl and I were part of a similar discussion in our daughter's new synagogue. For kindergarten, is going once a month, and on that day, the parents get to come in and talk to the rabbi. So we were there, and we were adding the grandparents' view on this, and they were pretty interested in what we had to say. We were outnumbered, you know, totally, but it seemed to have really engaged them, and they had a lot of things to say, and they were so overwhelmed with their lives. That's all.
So overwhelmed.
All overwhelmed with their lives, very much.
Yes.
But they were so appreciative of the rabbi.
Yeah.
So it does seem to be something that is happening in other places too.
Thank you for reminding me to respond to a piece of Terry's observation that I didn't respond to, which is they're not sitting here with us. How can we have a conversation if they're not in the room?
Well, we got to.
You got to be in the room. And my answer is, well, don't plan a program at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday night, right? They're not going to be here. There may not be a time when they can be here because they are overwhelmed in ways different than you were when you were a young parent, and in some ways exactly like you were. You know, some of you remember, but the conversations are going to happen differently. I think that we can imagine some transgenerational moments of intense authenticity, but it's not going to look like this. For the most part, they're going to have to listen to podcasts on their way from swimming to soccer or while they're heating up fish sticks for dinner. And so it requires us to be really proactive and responsive in going to them wherever we can find them and offering the kinds of experiences that are going to be high value enough for them to come out. You know, the example that I gave, that Arlene gave, already had an invested group of young adults who were already in a location. So it's already two advantages that you don't have most of the time. If I want to hear from most people, I have to cajole and get them to somehow agree to spend some time with me. So that's a great example. Yeah, more Erica.
Similar line to what you were earlier saying, I was thinking about when you were mentioning, and I knew that you had been doing this, but speaking to some of the kind of young adult, I think you would say maybe more young adult children of the adults in the room. And it feels like there's sort of this, I remember becoming a parent not long ago and sort of feeling like this forgotten, right? People came to see my child, people asked about my kid. You sort of are out, like, even now, my kid's is 4 years old, but it still revolves around them. And I remember not so long ago, not having a child and not being married and moving to Stanford. And because I'm me, came to a synagogue to say, can you use me? Because that's all I ever knew in my life. But most of my peers, most of my cohort, the people I met in my running group in Stanford were finding these other things. And it's sort of like these forgotten groups. And I think if you were to go to a bar in Stanford, if you were to go to an Indeed happy hour where a lot of the staff are of that age group, you probably would find more and more of those young adult children of our congregants who just didn't think to go walk in the temple doors. There's really these outlying groups, we have to go to them.
So Susan Costin, did you hear that? There's gonna be some charges at a bar on my credit card. And I'm gonna tell you that they're for interactions with young professionals, young adults. Yeah, no, that's right. Thank you. Just simply doing what we've always done and waiting for them to come is probably not a recipe for a flourishing congregation. Tamara.
Also struck, I just spent a week traveling with my kids and I just listening to them talk, they both still work remotely. And listening to them talk about how their lives are just so much less than my life and my experience, bound by time and space in terms of having to be in a specific space, like their employers can't even get them to come into the office. And so to think that all of our programming is supposed to require people to come into this space and have to do it at a set time is so foreign to that generation where everything's on demand and they're sharing things across people who live, their friends all across the country or even internationally. And so the things you're mentioning where you left the synagogue to go somewhere, like that may seem surprising to you, but to them, like if you don't respect them enough to kind of come to them, they don't have to go to somewhere anymore in anything else in their life. So why should they have to come here to our synagogue? So I know we have this building, we have to pay for the building and do things, but I think there's so many more ways. If you look reading this book, of so many of the examples they gave were digital basically, and that opened up whole opportunities.
Right.
So I just think there's so many opportunities that we haven't explored that will be outside the bounds of, we just define the synagogue as this, real estate.
Yeah. Did everyone at home hear what Tamara was saying? Good. What you said makes me think of some of more Erica's successful programs, which are these, I don't know, you call them like pop-up programs or something, where all of a sudden she'll text out to all of her teams, hey guys, let's meet at Starbucks at 5 o'clock tomorrow or today even. And they just show up because they're not bound by time and space in quite the way that that would drive me crazy. I would never say yes to that. But sometimes I do. Steve.
I also think in addition to all the things that you just mentioned and this conversation about the younger generation and how you have to reach them where they are, all of the social action activities that we have undertaken under Lisa's leadership and with lots of other people around here involved, I think that's also representative of how we've changed. And that is something that Gen Z in particular is very focused on. And so more of those kinds of activities, the changes that Lisa's got in the works for Mitzvah Day, all of those things are I think very positive aspects of the changes that we've made over the last few years.
Yeah, I'm proud that our movement has always been able to claim social action, social justice as a high priority. More than ever, the children that we've raised to have universal human rights as a core value are going to see that expression of Judaism as one of the most valuable. So they may not feel it important to do it with Temple Sinai, but if we can find that right nexus where we're activating and acting upon those values, yeah, that's right. They'll love it. Ronnie and then Terry.
I think there's a whole group of millennials out there that like my daughter. She was married in this temple, not physically, but by the clergy. And there's no question as her life cycle issues come up that she'll be coming to temple. Also, if you ask a millennial to do something, more than likely they'll say yes. It's like, you want to help me make sandwiches? Sure. As long as you catch them when they're not busy. So, you're easily engaged. That's my experience. That they're easily engaged. And I think the kids the parents whose kids are in the preschool will join the temple.
Yeah, and our people has always survived by what's known as Sharit Yisrael, the remnant of Israel. And what that means is that throughout generations, there's always a portion that we're never going to engage, that spins off into the periphery. And that's okay. You know, this isn't for everybody, but for the ones who've come back with their kids already, and the ones who have a strong sense of commandedness to make the world better, do some tikkun olam, it's not a hard sell. You know, sometimes it just means picking up the phone and finding the people to invite to do so. Let me take one more comment from Terry, and let me see if I have mine. No, okay, and then we'll move to the next piece.
I just wanted to add the women's retreat over this past weekend, I think is another example of something very unique and special. And I think that that cohort includes some people that you don't see around that much, and it might be worth reaching out to that group about why they show up and what aspects of that experience could be offered throughout the year that might pull them out.
Yeah, that's a great observation. At home, did you hear Terry's observation about women's retreat? Good. Cantor and I were talking about that on Monday. She told me all the details of everything that happened at women's retreat. Got you in trouble.
I would never. What happens at the
was-
women's retreat stays at the women's retreat.
What was that?
I said, what happens at the women's retreat stays at the women's retreat.
Yeah, and you told me you were going to say that publicly too. So what I asked her about was that when the women's retreat launched a bunch of years ago, it was almost entirely lay created. As personalities have come and gone, I think it relies a little bit more on professional support, but that is a great example of a highly successful program. Men, our retreat doesn't do the same thing in terms of ownership. What we experience is way better than the women's retreat. But it ends up falling on the professional staff enormously because men are lousy at executing programs. But I agree with you. And you know, I think part of what we touch on, Terry, part of the secret is exactly that same visceral, anecdotal knowledge that you have, which is camp. Special things happen at camp. So what we're effectively doing is creating mini camp experiences. We tried once to have a mid-year women's retreat here at the building, crashed and burned. It didn't go anywhere because it wasn't the same. You take people out of their environment, you give them an intense experience. It's like Israel trips. You know, when you get a group of people and you bring them to Israel together, it's done. You're bonded for life. So yes, that is a great example. Gary and then Carol.
Yeah, you know, I want to just, I don't want this to be a downer, but I want to just put a little bit of caution. You know, what we're talking about here is Big Tent. Okay, and doesn't let everybody. Now there's a, you know, in my field of business and you know, in consulting, there's a statement that says the customers you choose are the firm you'll become. Okay, Big Tent shows no direction. So while we're moving in this direction, etc., I just want us to keep in mind who we don't want. Okay, who we don't want in here. So just think about the fact that every group that we go after that should be part of us is who will we become.
That's really helpful. And I want everyone to hold on to that comment because it's going to, I think, play a really central role in our breakout conversations in another 2 minutes, maybe. We'll see. Carol?
As you're talking about contacting groups of people, my thought was, well, my 3 children were raised here, all have gone on different paths as far as their Judaism. Have you ever tried getting in touch with kids? Confirmation pictures used to be on a wall with those people who have
They were thinking of what, today or yesterday?
I'm working on framing.
Yeah, they're, you reframed, they're good, ready, they're,
Not done.
But there are people, they're adults now, of course, that you would get some interesting information as to, what was good, what was bad, what they like, what they might like. I mean, because again, circle of life, some of these people are getting ready to, as I say, their feet are not going to be above the ground. And then they turn to a rabbi, a temple, or whatever. But in between confirmation and end of life, what's happening? Those are the kids that I would like to hear, see what happens.
So thank you. Yes. A quick thought on that, and then I'll redirect us because I think it's related to what Gary was just cautioning. I think that there is an equation that is a difficult to capture set. Sorry, I'm saying this badly. I think it behooves us to think strategically about where and how we spend our time. Because, I mean, look at the team of people who run this place. I can't believe what Sinai is able to pull off. And it's only thanks to the unbelievable amounts of time that our volunteers give. But that said, if we're going to focus our energy on trying to figure out where customers can be found, and I use that crassly, but I have always believed, and and I think the leadership here has shared this with me. Steve and I talked about this a fair bit when he was membership VP, not going out so aggressively to try to find new customers, but instead focusing on who we are and building ourselves from a real strong sense of identity into something beautiful. It's the Field of Dreams model. And Larry and I talk about it all the time too. How good is the customer that you have to convince to come give us a try versus the people who hear about something vibrant? I just met with a brand new member earlier today. She's in her 80s. And after our fabulous conversation, she wrote to me saying, one thing I forgot to tell you about why I chose Sinai was because there's buzz out there in the community about Sinai. That's because we know who we are and we're excited about who we are. So I could spend time going out and finding those folks who decided long ago that there's nothing in congregational Judaism for them. And perhaps I should allocate some time to that. I think there would be some lessons we could learn. But I've got a great group of people here who are doing beautiful Judaism. I'd rather try to create something that draws in those who want it and get their best attention. Does that make sense?
Well, that isn't what I was talking about. That's
Okay, can you and I talk more about it afterwards?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, good.
And it might be something for Larry to do with the community.
Good.
Outreach.
Larry will join that conversation. Okay, so here, what's that? So here's what we're about to do. We're gonna break into those 4 groups that I talked about. I'm gonna invite one member from each of the 2 groups in the building to serve as scribe. Like I said, I'm sending Shelley and Maura Erica as well to be another set of ears. I'm going to send you into your space. I don't know if it might be hard to all stay in this room.
No.
But I
Have to go somewhere.
yeah. So maybe, I don't know, maybe the study next door, there's room. But here's what I'm going to ask you to do. And when we break up into groups, Marty is going to put the same questions in the chat box for the 2 different breakout rooms. But here's what we're going to be talking about. Okay. So I want you to discuss these points. At Temple Sinai, we're proud to say that growth happens here. What does the word growth mean? And Gary, this is, in my mind, this is something of a response to your question, which is if somebody is looking for something else and they're not interested in growing, then they're not going to find what they want here. When families show up 6 months before their kid turns 13 and they just want a bar mitzvah, our answer is no. That's not what we do here. Sometimes there's a next chapter of it's not going to happen in 6 months, but if you've got a couple years to invest in this, that's what we do. So we do say no. The next question is, keeping the idea that growth happens here in mind, because I think that's one of the most important pieces of our mission statement. The question is, what would success look like? What does it look like today? And what will it look like in 5 and then 20 years? And I also want you to then go on and answer the question, what would failure look like if we get this wrong? And try not to go to the obvious answer of, well, Temple Sinai will just have to, cut its cantor. We're thinking in terms of mission. What does it look like if we fail? Okay. 2 more questions. And this will be a series of answers different for each person. But the first question is, what would you be willing to compromise for the sake of Sinai's future? And the second question is, what is non-negotiable? Some of that was captured when we were doing the exercise with Betsy about, what's really core to your experience of a synagogue. But you may find that, what's core to me are Shabbat dinners on Friday nights, big 50 people in the room. But I'd be willing to compromise that because I think that would help more with achieving success. Or you might say, no, that's a non-negotiable. We got to keep doing that. So does everybody understand the goal here? Okay. Any questions or concerns? Okay, Marty, why don't you break the whole group into 2 rooms and make sure that Larry is in one and Cantor is in the other? Why don't we have this side of the room? Does anyone want to volunteer to be a scribe here? Thank you, Sandy. Why doesn't this side of the room, following Alan, go look for a place? And we're going to spend more than 20 minutes in this conversation. So hopefully everybody will keep their comments brief so that everyone else has a chance to share. Anybody?
It's okay. A lot of things.
Willing to jot down some notes?
Sorry.
Don't make me get into brand.
No, it doesn't get worse than us.
I knew somebody. Thank you very much. So why don't you feel free to turn the chairs around so that no one's sitting in the middle.
I
don't have any points.
I love that.
It's kind of like circle. Turn some chairs around. Don't worry about this.
Well, there's a word, I don't know.
Okay, Temple Sinai, we're about to say growth happens here. What does the word growth mean to you?
Yes, very good. I say change.
I think we did more promoting.
I think it was all very positive.
First. No,
not so much from an institutional perspective, but really is growth happening within me. And so the kinds of things that feed that growth are things like other meditation, you know, so for me, that kind of growth is happening. Who saw changed my life.
So the growth is change. As so what is the growth you're getting from the, what is your figures, asking what does growth mean to you?
Yeah, so it's about, but it's not about us as a
The collective,
congregation.
yeah.
It's honestly from a selfish perspective, am I growing within this community? And the answer has been yes.
It's how you're growing personally with how you live your everyday life.
Learning more about yourself, a deeper understanding, deeper commitment, deeper connection.
I would say though that giving every individual the opportunity for growth is what makes the synagogue dynamic and growing and cohesive. Because without giving individuals the opportunity for growth, you become stagnant as collective.
I think it's more like being creative. So not just finding something, oh, it's working, and I think trying to just stay at it. Everybody's happy and should, but always questioning and seeing where do you, where it doesn't have to mean for mistake, but questioning and being open to exploration and creativity. See, because we didn't have everything, and then. So it's just a constant re-examination of what's happening and these kinds of discussions, and then seeing is there something creative that we can keep moving to?
So it's like learning about yourself, more about yourself. I think it's learning about something about this, say the community part. Meeting, getting to know more people, doing more things, they teach you, you teach them. That's kind of like growth.
And the transfer of learning.
Yeah.
What would success look like today, in 5 years, and in 20 years? Well, we know what it looks like today.
But what is it?
I'm not sure. Oh, okay. I don't know, I was in one of the first breakout groups, and it was the Cantor and I and 2 other congregants, and you know, it's like what brought you to Sinai. It's hard, like I've been here 20 years, but it's my job, which is what brought me here. So like today, we're just, like the rabbi said, we're exploding. Like we are crazy busy. We have more programs than we've ever had before. We have more congregants than we've had. So I guess that's where I'm
Really, we've been higher in the past. We've had more.
That is very true.
So, but we're
Numbers.
much more than we were 10 years.
Because most of our new members are up in Boulder, most of the Chara families. Which don't have kids in Boulder.
I think a measurement would be the level of engagement, a meaningful engagement with different aspects of the congregation. So in terms of circles, the number of people who are self-selected that are willing to step up and participate in all of these different kinds of programs that we're talking about. I think that success would be growing the percentage of the congregation that partake in these kinds of activities.
I look at our impact statement, you know, we keep those statistics. You know, everybody remembers the impact statement.
Yeah.
And so we're going to hopefully do that annually. And that is really an indication of engagement. So just looking at the data and you know, just look around this group here, we're all pretty high consumers of Temple Finance. You know, like, we see each other at everything all of the time.
Not as much anymore.
It's nice to see you eat. But when you determine success,
mean, just in general, not necessarily simple or anything. You just set your goals, or you set your objectives, this is what I'm gonna do, this is how I'm gonna be successful. I'm gonna have, these measures, and I'm gonna reach these measures, and that'll be success. So what would work now successfully or in 5 years? I think the measures would change, what you set for your goals would change. So I don't know that you could say that what's successful today is what was successful in 5 years. Well, you have to see where you're at in 5 years and then set new goals or new objectives and then measure something. However, I don't mean it necessarily in the same way you take a test and measure, but instead of just, to me saying, oh, what's successful? Those people come here, they're engaged. Those are great feelings, but I don't know how you measure that. Not that you would say, oh, everybody who attend to our high holiday services raise your hand. I don't mean anything so regimented, but I think you determine success in my mind by you said, these are the goals that we want to set, or this is how we want to look at what success looks like, and then make some kind of measurement of how you reach it, like these.
I was saying that the measuring of success is the ability to remain facile, to make those changes, to move forward.
So it was our to remain, the ability to remain, taking notes. That's all that's right. Yeah.
I talked about level of engagement and measuring how many people, but I also think you got to slice it a little bit demographic to see how many people at what age group, what category, what single. Oh, I don't think we always do. I mean, now we have Larry here. He's trying to make sure, but I think that would be a measurement to see do we have enough in certain categories that are the millennials are interested in, or a different category, or
and who would set the goal? So you said
but I'm saying, I think just measure the number of things that people participate in by those categories. Is that correct?
Roughly 40%, 45% of the congregation participates in circles.
Yeah.
Right now, because I'm working with the development committee to get the numbers. The average years of membership is 15 years. The average age of the congregation, I don't think I'll disclose. No, somewhere around 58. Okay.
Who is participating? Who's participating? Who's not participating?
That's what I started to work on with Larry, and I said the average years of membership for the entire congregation is like 14, 15 years. The average years of membership circle participants is right there at 14 years.
We also have to look at the quality of the experience of those who are in circles. So 45% have signed up. How many have gone to only half of the circle and not come to the other half for one reason or another? Or what is the positive or negative experience it had? I think we need more years to know that, and it's not going to come from your statistics. I think we're just going to kind of almost know it.
Well, that's what, right now, I've been tasked with over 3 years.
Yeah.
So we can look at who's in any given year, or who's participated. And actually looking, you can see who's been consistently in circles for only once. Very trouble.
Yeah, but if you're looking at who signed up for circles, it's not necessarily the right number. Is what I think Arlene's wrong. You know, 40% sign up, maybe only 30% go to all the meetings, or go to the majority of meetings. So that's the number.
Julie and I had met about 10 years ago. The rabbi said to us, "Welcome to our family." And we walked in and he had us come right off the block, right up in my so that we were in earnest. And people came running over the grief. And this is what Temple Sinai is. And so now that we have circles,
not only is it the people who I've met over the years, but it's a tight-knit, these circles of producing tight-knit little groups of people that are friends, that are socializing, think that the goal really met what it was supposed to. And that, you know, I think that as new people join, they will bring their interests with them. And that successful will be that people will come, they'll feel welcome, and they'll bring their interests and their age group that's interested. You know, if you want to get a whole group of millennials there, take a Sunday brunch and both of them Scrooge brothers.
So on Sunday afternoons, that's very well attended. You know, something like the farm carnival that we had here, there were almost 60 families signed up. Over 100 people were here. So that was attractive towards that group, like, that's sort of like self-satisfied. But maybe they're actually talking about doing things like that, so.
Question was, what's it gonna look like in 5 years? What's it gonna look like?
I think it will look like
You know,
the people who, I think it'll look like the people who are joining active interest. Because those people are the ones that create what Temple Sinai is. So I think it'll still be a very thriving community. I can say what other than saying that the millennial that I know considers herself a member, and she will have a Seder at her house, and a lot of her friends are Jewish. Many of them might consider joining. I think it's a word of mouth thing. That's how we heard it.
All right, let's go on.
keep on timing, what was failure, let's not say, what was failure.
There's no such thing as one word only, learn from.
It's failure.
This injustice from his failure is only outcomes.
Only outcomes to learn from.
Yeah, obviously defining membership, well.
Stagnation.
Yes.
Well, I think myself, you know, Rabbi said the failure is like what's happening in many congregations, which is that there's, you know, if we have positive buzz, which is why people have sort of a negative buzz, in other words, no growth. We basically people saying, well, why should I go there? No growth.
It hasn't changed. Well, it's interesting because a couple of weeks ago, there was a service and it was old music. And, you know, I always tell people, I come for the music and some wisdom from the guy in front of it. It's always fulfills me. I learned the music because I come here. There are things from my childhood, and it was really interesting. I come into the service and I'm like, wait a minute, old music. And then I heard something that my mother used to sing and say, sounds like a church, and she would almost kid about it, that my grandmother used to sing where we were going to Bridgeport. So all of a sudden there was this, we're gonna go back. And there were so many different places to go back to.
Is that good?
That it was, I think, what we're doing when a little new comes in and a little old comes in, it eventually, when I came back to this, you know, at a point when I had been away, the music was new. I mean, Debbie Green wasn't around. I don't remember the music that well, except for the holidays. So it was an interesting experience because I'm not sure if it was met at the moment with as much excitement as we need the music on a regular basis, because I think the music has been getting richer and better and deeper. And it was really interesting to see and to feel.
I think what you experienced was really nostalgic. It triggered memories.
Yeah, but I didn't have the depth that I thought I would experience when I heard it. I thought, oh, that's really cool. But I couldn't come up with a song to step.
You know, it sounds like one of these success measures, probably archiving your. In other words, if the temple fact do that. You know, I was really looking forward to that service. I don't know if it was me or something else going on. I was really looking forward to that. Because you know what happens. I mean, we've lost some of those stories and sounds, etc. And if the temple can provide that also, the sort of as an archive of that, that would be a success factor.
So what would failure look like? We keep talking about successes.
We're talking about, what does it look like?
What is?
Failure to me is kind of points that are really. I mean, to me, any organization is going to survive and be engaged in if you have a great user experience. And failure to generate great user experiences is going to be an evolving thing, continues to develop. To avoid that stagnation, that you have to have enough touch points for each individual that comes here.
I think that I had must be about 25 years ago. My wife and I basically created what Passover was. And so, you know, it was a much bigger group that said we had some other things around there. And at this point, my 8-year-old niece came by and said, "Uncle Gary, I hope you will invite me in next year." Okay, so and I bring that up because that meant that it was not an obligation to go the way it was when I was that age. I was not, to me, going for a Passover was I was the worst experience. So to me, failure would be when people are who come here come reluctant and not coming to enjoy.
You're not about a 5-minute warning.
I think, I just want to say, we're not a community organization, we're not the Davidson Center, we're not the Italian Center, we're a temple. You know, why we're here is because we're practicing, we're interested in our spiritual growth, in our spiritual connection, in our connection to the divine. Was it Scott who talked about that was amazing? And while I was sitting here, I was looking forward and seeing how we have decorated this space, not decorated, how we have created this space. It doesn't have that know before whom you stand up there. And if there's ever a turnoff for millennials, that's it. It's like, you know, really, that concept of God doesn't exist for them. And so I think that what failure to me would look like is that we don't continue to evolve to engage people spiritually, to create that unique safe zone to connect.
So it's just only got less than 5 minutes. What would be willing to compromise for the sake of the future?
Let's combine both of them so we can only have a few minutes.
And what you got?
What is non-negotiable and what are you willing to compromise? Music, you're not willing.
Music program. Music. That's non-negotiable.
And I want to point out that Ruach is the first circle, but what circles is
It might have been Brotherhood, I don't know. Brotherhood is Cincinnati.
And anything else non-negotiable?
I would say religious will be non-negotiable. You know, we're spiraling to dying path.
I would say, maybe more general, is religious education.
Okay.
Because religious school to me implies a physical structure. It may evolve into something different, but religious education.
I think we need the same thing. A forum, a structured way to educate the younger children.
Only younger children?
No.
Yeah.
I would say that backwards is the negotiable is a physical space. You don't have to be here.
I actually
like that to, you don't have to be here all the time.
Right.
So some of the programs can be here, they can be online, they can be in the park, they can be in the parking lot. So,
But it's
they can be in a home. And, you know,
When good whiskey.
I've been whiskey on ocean. I've been a really strong struggle for the physical space of the weekend. I've been a member of a hobby island, and it's hard to, it takes a lot of work all the time to sustain it. We're not working, you know, individually to sustain, I mean, all of us are pretty involved, but what I mean is the kind of work that when you don't have a location, regardless of online connections and all of that, there is still something, whether it's as big, whether we decide to, you know, just have this space and forget about downstairs and don't fix anything downstairs, or, you know, but to not have a physical space that belongs to you, it takes away part of your identity, and it makes it harder to continue to connect with each other.
So we come up with anything,
What's the motion?
I would say nothing. I think I could compromise on maybe some of the structure of the services, or the clergy versus lay people, you know, I could compromise on that. I think it could work just as well. In a different type of service setting. It doesn't have to be a typical Friday night service or a typical Saturday morning, or maybe bar mitzvahs could look at a little bit. It could be compromised, not complete change, because you still need elements of that. But I think I can compromise on how it's kind of structured. But I have to know what it would look like, but because I think there's certain elements that have to be there. But I think we're talking about the Halev, all of a sudden moving to a Friday night service from a Saturday morning, very different type of service. That's a compromise. I mean, not that that's a compromise, but it's something different. It moves and it flows from the regular Friday night service to less service.
Let me try to play devil advocate on that is being a member of URJ. Something we would do.
Well,
And be our own thing.
then you know, all of the, you know, about the hiring, the pension plan for the staff, the, you know. It would be hard.
I'm not saying I would.
You know. I know people complain about the dues you want to, but.
They got to give it up their connection with
Yeah.
their national arm, but then they run into trouble.
Maybe that's why they're.
Thank you.
I think we left prematurely. They're all, half of them still aren't even back.
We got kicked out. It was.
Yeah.
I know.
Right,
Yeah,
everyone.
that was in mid-sentence too.
Right.
Yeah.
Muriel was
That's
I'm
good.
sure you were brilliant, Marty.
yes.
Marty,
Yeah.
Marty, I missed it, Marty. What were you saying?
Uh,
Marty's always
Marty, can
brilliant.
you close
This must
the,
have been.
the breakout room window?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, all.
They're still talking.
Marty and Andrea and Liz and Jane, thank you. Thank you guys for your
Thank you,
input.
Larry.
Much appreciated.
Nice job of organizing.
Great facilitation.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I've been using Nigunim for 20 years to shut a group up, and this is the first time I've ever needed to actually shush. I love what I saw happen. I don't know what happened in the breakout rooms. I'll hear more about it tomorrow when we process that. But just peeking into the study and then overhearing little bits here, it was just so fascinating. Part of what was really funny was, as I understand it, in the study, you all sold the building. And over here, Moira was saying, we got to have a building. It's non-negotiable. I did. I only heard a little snippet, so I may only have a partial picture. I also heard someone say that in a room like this, we don't have the words "know before whom you stand," and that is a significant change. That's a difference of theology. And I thought I would just mention that tomorrow, Wind is going to take a look at a survey that I've put together that's going to go out to the whole congregation, just trying to figure out, what do we actually believe as an aggregate? You know, lots of variations, as many variations as there are people. But, you know, does Baruch Atah Adonai still speak to most of our congregation? Or is that something that, you know, we know how to say, but we don't necessarily believe in the God who's listening to my prayers up there in the sky and going to, you know, do what I ask? So anyway, you can watch for that as well. This is another element of trying to make sure that we're staying where the people are, and not trying to pretend that the ivory tower is unassailable and non-negotiable, but to try to make sure we're leading from within the people. In fact, in the email that's going out, there's a little video explanation by me about what this survey is meant to do. And I kind of jokingly say, it's a smart thing every once in a while for a leader to just look over his shoulder and make sure the people are still there. So that's what that survey is meant to do. So here's what I want to say by means of wrapping tonight up. This is by no means a wrap up of the process that we have been on for decades at Temple Sinai. This is just the next chapter, next piece of conversation, and there's going to need to be a lot more that goes along. I don't know what the right answer is yet, but I would like to make sure that this engagement, this co-creation continues. And so I don't know, and I'm open to quick shows of hands. I don't know if it's going to look like a task force that gathers together for a very specific purpose to stay discussing this. Or maybe it's a series of parlor meetings, and you know, when you see an Awakenings parlor meeting coming up again a couple times a year, whatever, that's the kind of conversation you enjoy being a part of. Or maybe it's sort of an ongoing chat, electronic conversation chat board of some sort. Maybe it's a circle. Maybe it's an ongoing committee. Part of what I'd been imagining was another VP spot for congregational innovation. You know, just to kind of stay looking around the Jewish world, making sure that we're staying where we need to at the front edge of what health looks like. So, a show of hands, how many of you like the idea of a task force? How many like the idea? Okay, Steve's on, he's in. How many of you like the idea of parlor meetings with you know, some regularity? That's great. So at home too. Oh boy, that's just an overwhelmingly
Task force has a different ring to it.
Yeah, it does. Task force has a task. This, you know, you're right. That's not a great terminology. More, Erica.
What about an offshoot of one of those that has a little bit of a train the trainer and makes this available to millennials? Like
No, that's a stupid idea. That's really interesting. Train the trainer. This is why She's great. I love that. Okay, let's operationalize it tomorrow. Yeah. Well, what's not happening is the integration of this cohort to that one. You're right.
On Sunday morning, when some of the parents have to be in Sunday school, might be able to.
Did everyone hear Gary's suggestion?
No.
If we did something like this on a Sunday morning, when they might be willing to attend, I wonder how many of you remember how lovely it was to get rid of your kids? But Gary's right. That's when we had that group. To integrate those two groups would be really cool. Really cool. Okay. So a reminder that in a way, the pinnacle of this process, these 5 sessions, looking at this book, using it as a curriculum, the pinnacle or the culmination happens on Friday night. Rabbi Spratt is joining us for Shabbat dinner. You don't have to be here for dinner to get the full experience. It'll be a working dinner. Okay, you have until tomorrow to sign up for dinner. If cost of a dinner is prohibitive, please let me know. That's something we can always help with. But Rabbi Spratt will be with us through dinner, a working dinner where he'll make some comments and then engage the group a bit. And then the service, we chopped down the liturgy. Hope you'll be okay with that, so that we could give him as much time as possible to address the congregation and engage in dialogue. So Friday night is an evening I'm really looking forward to. And then we'll see you Saturday morning for Harrison Stujenki's bar mitzvah. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Oh, Gary, go ahead.
Just a question, because, if I were the rabbi, coming into a group like this, I would be a little, there's gonna be a bunch of people who've not been through this. They've not read the book, they don't, they're coming in completely cold. And then you have this group that not only has read his book, but has had 5 sessions. So if I'm, if I'm in there talking and I've got, it's gonna, what are his assumptions? Is he assuming he's gonna speak to this group or to a completely ignorant group? Or not ignorant, no.
I think that'd be fine.
Let me think about that, and I appreciate the observation. I've been in communication with him quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. Cantor Micah and I have been talking as a threesome, so we have thoughts on that. It's a good observation. Let me chew on it.
He's gonna say, all the people, you sit on the right side. Okay.
So maybe we all just
People talk to, they don't really know it.
correct, right? They're the ignorant ones. Maybe we just frame our observations and questions with it in mind that there might be people in the room who haven't thought about this quite as much as we.
Yes.
All right. I like to finish on time. I came close. Have a good night, everybody. Drive safe. Thanks, everyone at home.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye, everybody. Night all.
Night all.
You also get some of the retired old fogies to come and talk with some of the kids that go to school during the week. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can mix.